So I remember last time we talked, something that you said a few times was that nothingness must exist in some respect in order for it to make sense to invoke it as a concept, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, I guess what does that mean? In what respect, in your mind, does nothingness exist? And is it like one way of thinking about it is a relative opposite and counterpart in the ontological sense, and then another way would be a relative opposite and counterpart in the conceptual sense, namely that the concept of everything or something or existence would seem to demand, like, as by way of a definition, right, some opposite or some other. And I guess what I'm wondering is, to you, does it seem like when you say that it has to exist in some respect in order to be invoked, how do you conceive of the nature of that existence that it has?
Well, so I'm going to hold my own feet to the fire. I'm going to say void from now on, just so we know what we're all talking about. So to me, I think void exists in some capacity, and whether that is logically or physically proved, I think is besides the point. I think it's necessary as an exercise for consciousness to be able to understand that, in fact, there is no distinction, or to achieve that transcendental or existential feeling of oneness, that meaning, that sort of higher state. Contextualizing everything, I don't want to lose my train of thought there, because you asked very sophisticated and precise questions, Matthew, and so I have to focus. Can you reiterate that again?
Yeah, the question was, I actually think you already answered it, but the question was whether you conceive of the way in which that nothingness would have to exist in order to be invoked as being a conceptual necessity or an ontological necessity. And I think the answer that I heard you give was something like, if it exists conceptually as a necessary aspect, then it
Right.
exists ontologically, because you don't distinguish ultimately between something. I guess if something exists conceptually and consciousness is identical with the mystical one, then
Right.
obviously the ontology is going to just be one to one with that.
And so this is where the idea of infinite regress enters into play, because it's both. It's both that they are equivocal, or there's no distinction, and that they have their own identity. So to me, that's what I mean by infinite regress of paradoxes as well. So there's the infinite regress of infinite regress squared. That's what I call it. Is that what you just asked, like, question falls into another paradox, that both is the case. It is the case that, to me, that it is that void exists conceptually as a necessity to achieve that transcendental awareness and experience of truth as one discrete unit. And it then, but then one, it's after the fact that you realize there is no distinction once you've had that experience.